Hello, you're watching Transbrations. I'm Nahshondion. In honor and celebration of Black History Month, my first special guest is Secretary Shirley Weber, a native of Hope, Arkansas, and an academic and politician nominated to serve as the 31st California Secretary of State by Governor Gavin Newsom on December 22nd, 2020, and sworn into office on January 29th, 2021. She's California's first Black Secretary of State and only the 5th African-American to serve as a state constitutional officer in California's 170-year history. Secretary Weber was previously a member of the California State Assembly for the 79th Assembly District, which includes portions of San Diego County. As a member of the California Legislative Black Caucus, she was the first African-American to be elected to the California State Legislature south of Los Angeles. While Secretary Weber was an Assembly member, she authored AB 3121, a historical bill approved by Governor Gavin Newsom in May of 2020, and established a 9-member task force to inform Californians about slavery and to explore ways the state might provide reparations for slavery to African Americans. Secretary Weber is a powerful voice for justice who has dedicated her career to defending and strengthening our most fundamental civil rights, including the right to vote. In a time of unprecedented partisan attacks on our democracy, Secretary Weber is standing firm, standing straight, and standing strong to protect, secure, and expand California's right to vote. Hello, Secretary Weber. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is Black History Month. You are my first guest. It is an honor. I'm honored to have you here with me. At 3 years old, your father refused to back down in a dispute with a white farmer. A lynch mob had threatened his life. Do you remember any of those details?
No, at 3, I don't. I didn't remember any of the details of the things that happened. Obviously, most 3-year-olds don't. My older brothers and sisters, because I was the baby at the time, informed me of what had taken place much later in my life and how my father came to California and the kinds of challenges he faced.
Your family had fled in 1951, midnight on a train?
My father came first in August of 1951. He was the one who sneaked out of Arkansas, put on a train at night, and sent to California where my mother's mother lived. He worked and saved his money. So December 1st of 1951, the entire family was sent for and we came to California.
And your family had fled your 100-farm acre and moved west to the Pueblo del Rio projects in South Los Angeles, where you and your 7 brothers, your siblings, you lived alongside other African-American families, correct?
We lived in the Pueblos, but not initially. Initially, when we came to California, we lived with my grandmother in a 1-bedroom apartment. All 6 kids and 2 other adults, so 8 of us lived in an apartment that was kind of like a quadruplex. And at nighttime, some of my sisters slept next door with my grandmother's friend, and those of us, but we were really packed into a house. In California when we first came. We then moved to another place that was truly rat infested. I kind of remember that. And then we moved to, when I was, I guess 15, well, I was 5 years old, we moved to the Pueblos. They had just built the Pueblos. And so we moved into the Pueblos, one of the first families moving into a housing project.
Okay. I was gonna ask you, what was your experience like? But you had just mentioned rats and everything. So I think that kind of.
Yeah, I'm still scared of rats to this day as a result of that experience because we had humongous rats. They were big and it's a place where we lived. So I refuse to live with rats to this day. If there's a mouse in my house, it's got to go or I got to go, one or the other. We lived in a place that once again 2 bedrooms, with all of with 6 kids and 2 adults in a 2-bedroom place. On Trinity Street, I believe in Los Angeles.
Okay. I am a native of Los Angeles County. I'm from Pasadena. I've lived off and on in New York for the past 10 years. So you definitely wouldn't like New York because the rats are every year.
I've seen them in New York, yes. And these were huge rats. They were, it's amazing that we live in such what I would consider unfortunate and unsanitary conditions, despite the fact that, my family cleaned and did whatever. This place was truly rat infested. So lived there for maybe a year, and then because we were on a list to get into the housing project, the Pueblos in Los Angeles. And then we moved into the Pueblos when I think I was probably 5 or 6 years old. Yeah.
You had said at one point that your family was struggling in the projects. It was a large family. The challenge was great. But you had your family, you had the skills to overcome the challenges.
We did. It talks about strength of families and extended families, because when we came to California, my mother's brother had been here. He'd been in the military, and my grandmother was here in Los Angeles. And their kind of constant support of us with a huge family of 6 kids that grew to be 8 kids. Tremendous amount of support from those relatives, tremendous support from the relatives who were still in Arkansas. They would constantly, when there was the season for harvesting or particularly smoking meat and what have you, we had ham and bacon sent to us in the projects from California, constant coats and things like that. My aunt in Arkansas wanted to make sure that we were well cared for, and that and so as a result, despite living in the projects, we had to, and my mother didn't work because there were so many kids, and the whole family just pitched in. My older brother, who was one who really saw everything, he basically had a little job delivering papers at one point, and then cutting someone's lawn and all those things to help make ends meet, but also to provide us with children with some of the special things like going to the movies and those kinds of stuff. He was a big brother who really took care of all of us.
Movies back then, what movie theater? Was it in downtown LA somewhere?
It was in South Central LA. There were movie theaters on Broadway and Vernon, I believe there was a movie theater there that we went to. There was also one, the Roxy or something further down in the 20s near Trinity. There were a number of movie theaters around, and the unique thing is that they always had special things that occurred for kids. And so one of the things they did every week is that they pull for a bicycle. Somebody won a new bike. Every week there was a drawing for a bicycle from those kids who were there at the theater. And one week my brother actually won a bike. Oh. And that was one of the things, as a 5 or 6 year old, I truly remember that, because we were all in the theater screaming our brains out that Junior had won a bike, my older brother. And what was so memorable, because he went up to get the bike, and then he told the guy that he wanted a bike for girls, because he had 5 sisters, and they didn't have a bike, and he had a bike. Okay. He's papers, and so he got us our first and only bike we ever had. As he didn't get one for himself, a new one. He basically got a girl's bike for us, and we kept that bike until it literally fell apart.
Rode it till the wheels fell off.
Everything. All of us learned to ride a bike on that bicycle.
Mm-hmm. And back then, the Black community in LA was Central Avenue, right?
Central Avenue was where a lot of the Black folks were, and a little bit going west from Central, but Central was where the life was in the Black community. The Pueblos were a little further east of Central Avenue, but we could walk to Central Avenue, and we sometimes 20, 30 minutes walk over to Central Avenue, because that's where your Crest was, your 5 and dime stores. And it's also where the historic Black library was at that time. They had a lot of Black books in the library on Central Avenue, that branch. We walk all the way over to Central Avenue's library, and for my sisters and brothers to do research or to borrow books or whatever it was. So Central Avenue was really where the life was, and the stores, the restaurants, and all kinds of jazz clubs and activities were on Central Avenue.
After the Pueblo projects, you guys lived in Los Angeles your family lived in LA at 351 West 54th Street.
West 45th Street, yeah.
Oh, West 45th, Your mom was a poll worker at your home. What was that like?
Well, it was very memorable, because there was no other place for the voting to take place. And so my dad and my mom took all of our furniture out for every election. So it's embedded in your mind as a kid when election occurs, because all the furniture is into the garage and everybody's in the living room voting. And we have to walk to the back door, down the garage to the back door, because we didn't want to go in and interrupt voting. But it was really a time of pride for my mom, and everybody in the neighborhood knew the voting lady, because they voted at her house until she died.
Was that for a substantial period of time?
Yeah, we moved into this house in 1960, and my mother died in 1977. So it was a good time that she was actually in charge of the voting in Los Angeles.
Almost 2 decades.
Almost.
Your family often traveled back to Hope, Arkansas every 4 years, and you often saw the aftermath of lynchings, correct?
I saw the intimidation that occurred, and the kind of fear that people had was a part of a lot of the segregated activities when you went to the South, because you couldn't find a place to stay. So you constantly had to drive day and night to get to where you were going. There were no food service for you. You went to outdoor toilets, well, even when they had indoor facilities at service stations. So I got a chance to see it. I also got a chance to see the kind of fear that people felt when whites came around, because a lot of the activities were very segregated, and the yes ma'am, no ma'am kind of thing, the genuflex of individuals around whites was very, very clear when we visited Arkansas.
But your father didn't adhere to most of the Jim Crow laws, correct?
My father did not. My father would not allow us, which is interesting. He would not allow us to say yes sir, no sir.
Mm-hmm.
He said no is good enough. He would not allow us to let someone else get in front of us in line or those kinds of things. And he would never go to the back of any restaurant to get food. He would start. We'd have to go forever and ever to get to where we want to go, because he was not going to allow himself to be humiliated by having to go around the back and pay first price for food.
And so did he ever encounter hostility and physical acts of violence, or just was it threats, or what? How did that, he still lived, but how did it turn out?
Most of the time in the South, you don't interact with whites at all, because it's a whole segregated world, and you interact with them when you go into town and when you have to interact at that level. As a child going to Arkansas, I seldom saw white people until I went into town, because the time the people you lived next to you and along the road were Black. If you did a rec center, an activity, it was a Black activity. You went to church, it was Black churches. So you didn't really have to be around whites a lot unless you actually lived there and had to work with some of them or had to work for them. So my interaction with whites when I went to Arkansas was very, very limited. My parents made sure that we had very limited interaction with them. Yeah.
How did you pick up on, what did your parents, what did they say to you? How did they explain it to you? The situation, the conditions that you were living in?
Well, my dad would just say, those folks, he didn't have high opinions of them, so he didn't bite his tongue about how we should react to them. But he also said, that, we would have a better world because we'd be educated or, those kinds of things to make ourselves independent. If anyone tried to insult my father, he would respond, and occasionally there were confrontations in various places well, he was not an angry, hot-headed person, but he was not going to allow people to humiliate him or to call him the N-word or those kinds of things. No, he was not. It was not him. Now, people in the South just said he was crazy. That's a way of dismissing strong Black people, is that, Dave is kind of crazy. And so you could be dismissed as not having the proper sense because you didn't have the proper protocol to deal with individuals. So they just assumed he was crazy, and that kind of stuff. I thought it was somewhat courageous because every 4 years we went to Arkansas, there was always somebody saying something or some confrontation before we left. But they just dismissed him as being crazy.
Do you remember around what age you learned that your great-grandmother was a slave?
Well, history was not really taught to us in the public schools of Los Angeles. You didn't know a whole lot about it. You began to see it more on television in terms of the racism that people suffered and the civil rights movement and the March on Washington and all those kinds of things. You remember the images that were there and learned about it through your parents in terms of them seeing that things had opened up for them in terms of going to the South and not having the black-white signs on the buses and other places like that. So you got a sense of it. There was not really a whole lot of discussion of it. It wasn't until I really became a student at the university that I really, it's kind of like it, but it wasn't really there because you didn't think you had the capacity to basically trace your family that far back. And so when I went to the university, I was at the university, and that's when Roots came out, that everybody then started believing that they could trace their family and began to really collect information and those kinds of things in search of your own heritage.
Tonight, we present a landmark in television entertainment. Roots, the true story Alex Haley uncovered in his 12-year search across the 7 generations of his ancestry. After 2 years of production, we present this incredible saga in an epic motion picture. Roots, the current #1 best-selling novel, is the television event of the year. From primitive Africa to the Old South. Roots sweeps across the panorama of a young America, bursting with all the dreams, all the joys, and all the hardships of a vibrant country and its people. through the years of slavery, the Civil War,
Are we gonna whoop them Yankees?
Reconstruction, and the struggle to survive.
We want you, nigger.
A film spanning more than 100 years, generation to generation, continent to continent, slavery to freedom.
Hear me, O African, the flesh of your flesh has come to freedom. We are free.
Roots, starring Ben Vereen, Edward Asner, Lorne Greene, Cicely Tyson, O.J. Simpson, Linda Day George, Chuck Connors, John Amos, Leslie Uggams, Lloyd Bridges, Burl Ives, Louis Gossett Jr., Vic Morrow, George Stanford Brown, Ralph Waite, and introducing LeVar Burton as Kunta Kinte. Now, we are proud to present the triumph of an American family, Roots.
But before that, people kind of knew, they all lived around each other, so they knew who their grandmother was and those kind of things. I knew my grandfather could barely, I don't think he could read, my dad's father. And he was very, very afraid of whites. He was very much afraid of them because he'd seen the Elaine riots and a couple of other things that were so horrific. And he felt that there was nothing that people could do to help you because, there were no trials, there was no justice for people at that time.
Our Black History Month series ends tonight with one of the bloodiest race riots in the country, and it happened right here in Arkansas. Tonight, there's new information from a fact-finding mission by a Little Rock professor.
This covers the time period of October 1919 to January 1920.
We start with Julian Crawford at the Arkansas State Archives. She takes us back 100 years in Phillips County through photos and newspapers. Black veterans returning from World War I were upset over their wages. They hired an attorney and planned to take the sharecroppers to court, but never had the chance. Historians estimate between 100 and 300 African Americans were killed in what's now known as the Elaine Massacre. So I've been waiting weeks to talk to you about this new discovery in the ledger. Tell me a little bit about what you all found when you opened this up.
We were able to piece together what happened that night immediately following the shootings.
For decades, the black workers were to blame, accused of planning riots. But this ledger, found in the attic of the Helena Museum of Phillips County, tells another story.
We discovered that the posse was comprised largely of the men that made up the American Legion Hall for Phillips County. And they attest to this and give a testimony of how they were recruited in this ledger.
Dr. Brian Mitchell says it and other recently found documents suggest that the white employers sparked the violence, fearing the lawsuits from their black workers. In 1920, this letter was sent to the Little Rock Mosaic Temple, supporting the ledger's record.
He maintains that the police officers who were there were not there accidentally, and that the plantation owners where the sharecroppers were planning to sue had all sent out men to surround the church, and that they were going to intimidate and shoot into the church. It changes the narrative, completely.
Dr. Mitchell believes there's much more to this story, but we may never know every turn of events that led to more than 100 deaths. He plans to continue searching for more documents to find facts that could change how the Elaine Massacre was written into history. We'll be right back.
And who, in your great-grandmother, the one that was a slave, what was her name?
I'm not sure. Her name was Alabama.
Alabama. And was that your mother's?
My father's mother, Alabama. Yeah.
That was your father's mother or your father's grandmother?
His mother was Alabama. I don't remember my father's grandmother's name as such, or his father. And his father's name was we have pictures of him, but I don't remember his name of grandfather who was there. My grandfather on my mother's side said that his daddy, who was Rufus, became free when he was 7 years old. The freedom came at 7, and he didn't know his birthday and those kinds of things. But he knew that when he was 7 years old, freedom came to Arkansas. Yeah.
Wow. And just to let you know, the impact of roots, my aunt named my cousin Kizzy. I was born in 78, but I remember even, I don't remember when Roots came out, but I remember hearing, I remember Roots. I don't know if it was the second time around it was playing, but I remember Roots. Yeah.
Roots came out in the early 70s.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it was at another point when they were replaying it.
Probably replaying it over and over. Alex came to UCLA in the 60s when I was an undergraduate and talking about his book, Roots. And then the movie came out in the early 70s, I think late 60s, early 70s, when the movie came out, and lots of folks saw it. And it's at that point, a lot of folks saw it, didn't want to look at it anymore because they said it made them so angry. Mm-hmm. What happens oftentimes is that it was hard to get out of your grandparents information about your past, because it was always something that in their mind was somewhat humiliating. Yeah. And it demonstrated that they didn't have a sense of strength and control. So a lot of times if I'd ask my grandparents something, they'd give me very short, quick answers, but not really dwell on all the things that they had to endure.
Your father was deprived of an education. He was semi-literate and he dropped out after 6th grade. And he was forced to be a sharecropper. Had that not been the case, do you think your father would still have been influenced to groom you and your siblings to love learning and insist that you prioritize and finish school?
I think it did. My father didn't necessarily drop out. He was pushed out. He was not allowed to go to school. So it was not like he had a choice. He was not allowed because their perception was a tall, strong, physically able Black man is what good is an education going to do him, was what white thought. So he was forced to come to work for them. There's nothing his father could do about it, because if you didn't work for them, then they wouldn't let you get products in the store. You couldn't get feed for your own crops or whatever it was. So you pretty much were forced to not go to school. They saw no value in you going to school, despite the fact that you may have seen value in going it. So most of the Black men his age did not complete school. My father probably would have, because when I look at my cousins who were still in Arkansas, who lived in Arkansas, all of them, because of the denial, the family that was there in Arkansas made sure that everybody went to Philander Smith College in Little Rock. And they all pooled their resources and those kinds of things. And so my cousins that are my age, my generation, my first cousins, all have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. They're teachers, librarians, you name it. And they all band together, the aunts and uncles, to make sure that those who wanted to go went to college. And quite a few of them actually went to college.
Wow. Okay. That's great. You earned a BA and an MA and a PhD in communications at UCLA. Was that in political communications?
It had to do with history of speech and a history of being able to communicate effectively. So my minor was history, because my focus was on the impact of communication on movements and philosophy. And so I studied and did Malcolm X, and my dissertation was on Marcus Garvey and Black nationalism and the role that speech played in moving that movement forward.
What did you experience while completing your dissertation on Marcus Garvey that reminded you of what held your father back as a child and endangered his life in Hope, Arkansas?
Well, the unique thing was I had been at UCLA and I was admitted before there was a EOP, so I was technically qualified, quote unquote, and there's the eyesight. And I did my work. I got lots of A's and did what I needed to do to get my degree. When I got to I would say almost the end at the PhD program, my chair of the department wanted to deny me the opportunity to continue. At the time, I was teaching at San Diego State, building Black Studies, and I got a call to come to UCLA. I went to UCLA, and his recommendation for me was that I should go away without any rationale for it, no grades, no nothing, because every class he taught that I took, I got an A in it, whether it was an undergraduate or graduate student. And he wanted me to leave the program. And so, and was refusing to put together to have access to a committee. And I had actually was ahead of everybody that entered the university with me. I was ahead of everyone in my class. I completed all the work in record time. And he did not want me to take the exam that allowed me to write my dissertation and to have a committee to sit for my dissertation. So he tried to block me from graduating. And my husband at the time, I just got married, was a lawyer who basically threatened to sue the university because I had satisfied all the requirements of the university, and they were telling me that I should just simply go away. And they had no reason to put me out, so they couldn't put me out of the university. So they thought they could psychologically make me feel like I wasn't worthy and that I should just go away because nobody really wants to serve on your committee.
And is that the first time you realized that you were gonna not have to fight, but is that the first time when you realized that, you know, you were going to, was that the first time you had came across opposition, major opposition like that as a Black person, as a Black woman?
Yeah, it was. And I think, and it was somewhat shocking because this was a department that I had been in for 5 or 6 years. And I had done good work. I had interacted with all the faculty, never any problems, had gotten good grades in all of my classes and did the work that I was supposed to do. So when a person calls you to their office and you go in, and I drive to LA to go meet with the chair of the department. And I'm thinking he's going to sit down and discuss with me my plan moving forward, that I needed to take my language exams and my qualifiers and those kind of things. And he basically said, I've come here because I think you should leave the program. And I said, go where? He said, just leave. I mean, he didn't, I said, you mean like do a research tour? He said, no, just leave. And it was shocking because this was a man that I had taken independent studies with. I wrote some paper that was like 80 pages on a guy named Michael David. And so I had worked closely with this man who was chair of the department. So for him to say to me, just go away, it was okay. And I ended up threatening to have to sue the university. And when I went through that process and they finally, the dean of graduate studies was amazed that I was even, that I was getting ready to sue them because he thought that the guy had good reason to eliminate me from the program. And he did not. He said, well, you have to have a B average. And I had like an A- average. He said, you can't stay here longer than 8 years working on a PhD. I hadn't been out of high school 8 years. I told him I've gotten 2 degrees and I've only been in the doctoral program for 1 year. So I said, and I told him my husband's going to sue you guys and this is what's going to happen. And so they all backed down at that moment. And I got my committee together and basically finished my dissertation. But it was really shocking to me and I guess maybe because I had not, being from the projects and being from the Pueblos, I had not really asserted myself on the campus in terms of, I was there to get a degree, to get in and get out. I didn't sit in the coffee room with them. I didn't laugh and joke with them. I just basically did what I needed to do to graduate. And so many of them thought, like most students who get in the doctoral program, that if you ignore them, you don't give them student fellowship, you don't do these things, that they will go away. And most people do. They get bored. They say, oh, wow, these people don't like me. I'm a leave. And so I saw many students who came into the university, and because they didn't get the kind of support that was being given to white students, they just left. And I felt, when the man told me to leave, you obviously question yourself and your own competencies, that maybe you should leave. But my husband was strong, and he said, no, you've come this far. You've done all this work. You got all these great grades. They're gonna get you a committee, or else we're gonna sue them. And because they had been sued before by other students.
Was your father still alive at this point?
Yes, my father was. My father was alive and supportive of me getting my doctorate. He didn't even know what a doctorate was. When I had a chance to go and I had a fellowship funding for it, I told him, I said, they want me to get a PhD, and I don't know if I want to do that. He said, and his response was, what is it? And I told him it's the highest degree that you can get in any academic field anywhere in the world. And he said, let's go get it. Now, that was my dad's attitude. Let us go get it. That was his attitude.
Time to go.
Yeah, it's time to go get it. And so he was there when I got my doctorate. He was at the graduation. He and my mom. It was one of their proudest moments.
And all of your siblings?
Yes. All of my siblings. Yes.
Great. And all of your family in LA, right?
All of my family at that time was in LA, and they're still kind of around LA. Mm-hmm.
Never thought I'd be a college professor until Asante, my only Black professor at UCLA, gave me a shot. I became a Woodrow Wilson Fellow that paved the way for my 40-year career at State College. Affirmative action works. Vote yes on Prop 16.
Yes, indeed, it did. I
remember California in the mid-90s? Tupac was the king of West Coast rap. California's governor supported denying public services to undocumented immigrants, and voters decided to end affirmative action. California has changed a lot since then. Now, voters are being asked to rewind the clock and make affirmative action legal again. something that's the case in 42 states. And it boils down to this: do equal rights mean no group can have an advantage over another? Or is it about recognizing that forces informed by centuries of oppression make a colorblind legal framework impossible? Enter the heated debate over Proposition 16.
Hi, I'm CalMatters higher education reporter Michael Zinstein, and this is what you need to know about Prop 16 in under a minute.
Prop 16 would allow public agencies such as local governments and state universities to consider race, gender, and ethnicity as factors in hiring, contracting, and admissions. At UC Berkeley and UCLA, the state's most competitive public universities, enrollment declined for Black, Latino, and Native American freshmen once affirmative action was forbidden. There's long been a push to reinstate affirmative action, but 2020 forced many Californians to rethink systemic racism and how it keeps the playing field unequal, helping to put Prop 16 before voters. Supporters say reinstating affirmative action can help to undo generations of racism and discrimination. It would also let state agencies directly target groups of people who are underrepresented, like Black and women academics in university job openings. Opponents say California is already making strides that benefit people of color and women in college enrollment and public employment. So, vote yes if you believe California should again allow for affirmative action. Vote no if you don't. For more information on Prop 16 and everything on the November ballot, visit calmatters.org.
I never thought about being a college professor. You know, you think of being what you see. And what I saw every day was teachers. And I'd always been told that I was going to be a K-12 teacher. And I love teaching. And so that was my vision, to become a teacher. Asante nominated me to be a Woodrow Wilson Fellow. And a Woodrow Wilson Fellow is a distinguished position. There are only a few of them in the United States, and they're basically people that they believe are going to be university professors and shape the knowledge at the university. So I was nominated to be a Woodrow Wilson Fellow by Dr. Asante. And I said to him, why are you nominating me? I'm not one of these brainiacs as such. And he said, I'm nominating you because you deserve it. And if I don't nominate Black people, who will? And he was African-American, and he was a professor at the UCLA, the only Black professor that I saw at UCLA that I had as an undergraduate. So he nominated me, and I got one of the Woodrow Wilson Fellows. Out of the 6,000 or 7,000 graduates, there were 17 of us at UCLA who were Woodrow Wilson Fellows. And that opens the door for you to get into graduate programs, to get funded for graduate work, and to become a university professor.
I believe this is the first time that I'm talking to someone who went through that program and was a fellow, a Woodrow Wilson Fellow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning some new things. And
so we all were, yeah.
Your first experience as an elected official was in 1988. You joined the San Diego Unified School Board?
Yes, I was elected to be a member of the San Diego City School Board of Education, which is at that time the 7th largest or 6th largest school district in the nation, and continues to be the 2nd largest school district in California.
And your goal was to improve the system for your young children who were 7 and 10 at that time?
Well, yeah, they were young kids. My goal was to improve it for them, but really improve it for all the Black kids in San Diego, as well as all kids. We had some strong support and advocacy in different areas, but we needed to push the school district even more because of our Black boys who were failing and the system not being responsive to some of the needs that African Americans had, and the achievement gap that was so great and so persistent. You stated in some previous interviews that you never saw yourself as a politician. And you had retired almost after 40 years at the university. You were on your way to build a center in Jossi, West Africa. But in the fall of 2011, Tony Atkins had recruited you to run for the California State Assembly. Yes, Tony Atkins did recruit me. And my husband had talked years before about basically being in the legislature because he was much more politically active than I was. Didn't have that kind of interest. I wanted to be a teacher, and I thought I'd done this career 40 years. I'd served on the school board, but I'd been a professor for 40 years and enjoyed working with young people and inspiring them to learn and to grow. So I never thought of myself as a politician or being elected to office, and surely not in the state legislature in California. Mm-hmm. Tony Atkins convinced me, and one of the things she said to me that probably convinced me more is that at that time, there was no one in the legislature that had really in-depth knowledge of K-12 and post-secondary education, that I had done all of that work, and that they needed someone who could help in the area of education because of the fact that a lot of things were happening at the university and in K-12 that was not necessarily beneficial to kids. and people were making these decisions, not because they weren't good-hearted, but because they were uninformed. And that I had all this experience and that I had much to give in terms of what we were going to do effectively for kids in California. So she was correct in that sense, that there wasn't anyone there who could actually advocate. And she said, and nobody has a stronger voice than you in the state and this nation. So after thinking about it, I realized, as I said, she got to my guilt to the extent that I had had a wonderful education in the public schools of Los Angeles, despite being in the projects. I had great teachers, and UCLA, and graduated from UCLA with 3 degrees and only owed $2,500. That in itself was phenomenal. And I credit the strong public school systems and the university systems that California has that are second to none in the world to help anyone who wants to go to school and be successful to do that.
And you said and real quick, I went to Cal State LA in 1997 for a few semesters. And I know you taught there at one point. Were you teaching there in 1997?
No, I wasn't. I taught at Cal State LA in 1972.
Oh, okay. You had also stated before that you felt indebted, that, you were pulled and drafted into politics. You never volunteered to run for any office on your own, but you felt indebted to California because of the superior education that you had received.
Yes, the fact that, I didn't have money. I'm a poor kid. And UCLA at the time, their tuition was $80.50 to go to UCLA, one of the most prestigious schools in the world. And the same was true at our community college. Our community college was free. And our Cal State campus was $40 some a semester. So California was underwriting all of its education because that's how California wanted to build itself, to have a strong education for all kids. And so this 3-tier system that we had at the university was second to none. And I, being a poor kid from the projects, it was a gift. It was a gift to be able to go to some of the best universities in the world and not break the bank in the process of doing it.
When you won the election in November of 2012, 61.7% of the vote, defeating the Republican opponent. You also mentioned that you don't act like a politician, you don't do things as other politicians do, and that you didn't see politics as the only way to make a difference. With your backstory, did you ever see yourself playing a role in making a difference to impact the future of African-American lives?
I thought and still believe very strongly. I just came from an event with one of my former students who now is a law professor. I felt that the years I spent at the university made a tremendous impact on kids and young people. Having a professor who looked like them in many cases, and in some cases there were other students that were non-Black who were my students. I think teaching them correct information and Black studies and taking them around the world on trips changed the view in the world that these young people have. And every time I find one of them, they are doing things that are so amazing. And they go back to the fact that when we met, I became their mentor, their support. So I know, without going into the legislature, that you can have a profound impact upon the life of young people and older people as well. You can change their behavior. And so I knew that whatever I did after I retired from the university, that I had already fulfilled my dream of educating a population and creating a generation of change makers and movers and shakers in California and across the nation. And so I didn't have to go to Sacramento to do that because I'd already done it. Going to Sacramento expanded my view and my reach that's there and creates greater opportunity for young people who want to be successful. But I had already done so much work already that if I'd gone to Sacramento, it was fine. But if I had not, I think my career would have been complete.
Okay. I'm going to read a few quotes. This is based on your time in Sacramento as a legislature, 79th Assembly District. She's an education reformer who doesn't flinch when taking on powerful teachers' unions, shrugs off setbacks, and just won't die on issues she cares about. That was somebody referencing you. And then this is your quote. I don't fear that I'm going to get lynched at night or that someone is going to bomb my house. I don't fear that. What my predecessors stood for and fought for was a whole lot harder than what I'm fighting for today.
That is so true. Yeah, and that is so true. And that's what really motivated me to do a lot of the work that I did that was difficult, that was hard, facing the teachers unions who were just sometimes relentlessly opposed to me because I was advocating for kids. Not that I was opposed to them, and I was once a union leader, so it wasn't that I was opposed to unions. I just believe people should be accountable for the children that they're educating. And I knew that if someone just took a personal interest in our kids, that it makes a difference, because that's what happened to me, you know. And so I don't back down, because I think about what can I do? What would happen to me? I'd lose an election. Oh, well, you know, nobody's going to bomb my house. Nobody's going to treat me like the way they treated my daddy. And if someone were to try to eliminate me, at least there would be an investigation. At least there would be an investigation. Where if you're in the South, if they lynch you, there was nothing. There was no, you look at the books of lynchings and you see pictures of people standing with no mask on who lynched individuals, and no one has ever prosecuted any of those people for the trauma they have caused and the harm they've caused. So I tell people when they start telling me I'm courageous, I said, no, my daddy was courageous, you know, because he had backup. I have lots of backup, whether people know I am or the media, whatever it may be. So it's a lot different. And so you're courageous about things, but it by no means matches what our ancestors had to fight.
Definitely. That is definitely true. Often her proposals stall in Democratic-controlled legislature or get vetoed by fellow Democratic Governor Jerry Brown. Critics consider her a stubborn, impatient, anti-teachers union zealot. But Weber says she's not deterred. It doesn't bother me that I'm upsetting people who don't want to change because they've got to change. I come out of a legacy that says if you don't keep kicking at the door, you'll never be able to wear it down or open it. So I keep kicking. When I see what's going on, I'm offended as a senior member of this committee who has probably more educational background and experience than y'all put together on top of each other. She said during the meeting held to vet the proposal, her forceful voice quivering.
The shade of it all.
She found Democratic Assemblyman Patrick O'Donnell's desire to slice off a piece of her bill and make it his own even more galling. You're gonna rape me, rape my bill, and take it as your own? Weber said in a 2015 LA Weekly interview, after the work we've done without my name on it, I'm not having that. You may do it, but not without my permission.
Yes, that was in one of the meetings where, you know, people have a tendency to minimize what you do, to take your stuff and turn it into something else. And people sit around and quietly accept it because they feel like, well, if I say anything, that the chair will be angry, the speaker will be mad, all these things will happen. Well, I didn't fear any of that. I mean, I didn't fear not being popular because I didn't come there to be popular. I came to raise the issues and fight for what I thought young people needed, in this case, in education. And so I was not, I didn't back down. And it's amazing. People play that video all over the world. But, I was not going to give you permission to take my stuff that I'd worked on and then change it and turn it into something that doesn't look like what I want it to be. I'm going to fight, period. And everybody knows that. And so, people thought that would be the end of me in terms of political influence, same way with the police and everybody else. They thought, we'll wear this woman down and this will be it for her and things will be done. No, I'm not going for that. You're not going to disrespect me, and no one has. And I tell people, if you tolerate that kind of indifference towards you and your legislation, that's exactly what will happen. I have pulled legislation because I refuse to allow them to mess over it and have my name on it. Nope, not going to do that. Take that and throw it in the trash. I'll be back next session. That's my attitude towards it, and that's not that I'm uncompromising, but I'm not going to turn something good into something horrible. And I've seen people do that, or something that's just neutral that doesn't do anything. That kind of time to waste, and nor do the people that I've come there to represent have that kind of time to waste. And my community always appreciated my honesty, my hard work, and my fight on their behalf.
We must do something. We must move forward. And I ask you not to park my bill, but to keep it in the conversation. I ask you not to go along with parking all these things because it's convenient, but to actually put this bill into the conversation by moving it forward to the next level. And I know that's controversial, but I think at some point our children deserve of those of us to stand up for them and to fight to make sure this happens. I could have copped out. It would have been all nice. We'd all been dancing and skipping down the yellow brick road. But I refuse to do that today. I refuse to do that because I did not come here to go along with the program. And what am I going to do after 40 years of working in a system that I'm frustrated by? I'm going to go along with just to get along? No, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge each one of you to stand with me on this issue.
I'm a difficult person for them to handle because I'm not easily intimidated. Weber said, speaking about her relationship with the union. I told them, if my daddy was threatened by the Klan, my God, what the heck am I worried about?
Exactly. I wasn't easily intimidated. I knew that the community I served appreciated what I did because they would tell me that. I mean, and they did it by constantly reelecting me. I guess I was unique in a sense that I was already older, had done a lot of things before. People knew what my heart was. I was in trying to convince people that I'm a good person because that had already been established. And so I didn't fear what many of them fear. You know, I talked to I talked to young people on the floor of the assembly, and they would often say one thing. They said, Dr. Weber, you're the only person on this floor who's free. I said, what do you mean by that? That I wasn't influenced by being afraid of the party or whatever was going on at the time, because I was just trying to do what was right, you know. And sometimes I agreed with people, sometimes I didn't. But it wasn't malicious and it wasn't self-serving. And I think that's probably more than anything got people to thinking that, okay, this woman might be okay, because it wasn't about me getting something out of it. You know, I'd already done my career. I'd already made my mark. I'd already made my money. I didn't have to be in the assembly, okay? And so as a result, I was free to basically advocate for people who had never had an advocate before. And that was surprising to a lot of people, because I wasn't sitting around counting to see, was this going to make me important? Was I going to get a special thing from the governor? That was never on my mind. It was always trying to do what's right.
Mm-hmm. And they were not used to that.
No, because everybody always wanted something. They wanted something else.
And some of the success that you have had regarding some of the bills you created was AB 953, which was signed several years ago, which requires the police departments across the state to collect demographic data on people they stop.
Yeah, the racial profiling bill, 953, was the only mandated racial profiling in the nation. People had recommendations during Obama's administration that they should do this, but they were not mandates. They were recommendations. And so you could do it or not do it or whatever. This was the first time that it was mandated that the police has to collect the data, that we have to have the information, and there's an outside independent committee that deals with it. It was the first time, and people were very upset. I shouldn't say people were pleased in the end when it happened, but clearly law enforcement did not want to impose those kinds of requirements and restrictions on them to collect data. Sound like a nothing bill, but in their mind, it was everything. And it was there. And when I entered the assembly, the law enforcement seldom lost any battle. They won almost every battle, you know, because they could intimidate members or do various things, but they won every battle except for the ones that I fought.
So, moving on to AB 392, you had said that was a part of a 400-year challenge for racial justice in the United States. You closed the session by dedicating the bill to your 2 grandchildren. And you had, when the vote was called, criminal justice advocates stood in the balcony and sang.
I don't know if they sang. I don't remember them singing. I just know that there was a lot of folks in that room, and they may have started singing. I'm not sure. But
This Land Is Your Land? Were they singing This Land Is Your Land?
I'm not really, you know, it was so much going on. There may have been a few people singing, and I, you know, it was such a momentous occasion because of the fact that people who thought, you know, we thought we'd eke it out and barely get 41 votes, and we got more than 41 votes.
Mm-hmm.
We got even some Republicans voting for the bill. And law enforcement had spent, I think, $1 million trying to discredit me on this bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they could not discredit me in the communities nor in the state. And it was a time that, you know, when people looked and said, you know, it's possible to raise these issues and win. Mm-hmm. You know, because before that, everything would die. If it was anything that challenged or required law enforcement to be accountable, it would die. And so this was after Trayvon Martin, but it was before many of the other deaths that occurred in the nation, mm-hmm. about changing the standard by which people can use lethal force.
And is this this the same time that they had started calling you a terrorist?
They may have. I think they.
No. I'm sorry. They were saying that they were trying to say that you were committing treason.
You know, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to that because I was so focused on my bill, and people in the community were focused on fighting back the negative information that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have people who will say that, she's not telling the truth. She has ulterior motives, we all of that. I mean, all of that stuff was there, but I seldom paid attention to it, and I seldom responded to it because I did the work. I worked with members. I went from office to office. I shared information with them. And at some point, I pretty much, I put in what I needed to put in order to get the members on the floor to agree to it. I had the support of the speaker of the President Pro Tem Atkins in the Senate, and eventually had the support of the speaker in the House. But we got all the folks to vote for this bill that folks said they would never vote for, and they did. And we're still fighting because they don't want to implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented. So when you pass a bill, you still got to continue to fight, because if you don't pay attention, they will take it and turn it into something that is undesirable. And so I'm constantly still fighting to make sure that the issues of when you use force and when you don't use force is implemented. And we're winning the cases in courts where people have tried to misinterpret it. But we're pushing forward with it because it's a just bill, and it changed the narrative in terms of when people can use force in California, not when they feel like you're a threat, but when you truly are using force yourself.
And we see that being tested right now in Los Angeles with the case of Keenan Anderson, who was the cousin to Patrisse Cullors, the founder of the Black Lives Matter movement. Her cousin was tasered 6 times within, I think, 45 seconds, and he died hours later at the hospital. And so there's a lot of,
use of force, a lot of use of necessary use of force.
A vigil was held this evening for a teacher who died following a traffic crash in Venice. Keenan Anderson passed away almost 2 weeks ago after officers used a stun gun and restrained him. The vigil was held at the location where the 31-year-old English teacher died. That's at Venice and Lincoln Boulevards. Anderson is one of 3 people who died in separate use of force incidents involving the LAPD, all of them in the first 3 days of the new year.
And speaking of force, August 19, 2019, Newsom signed AB 392, Stephen Clark's law, which redefines circumstances under which a homicide by peace officers deemed justifiable. And this is it. It's Stephen Clark's. Yeah, that's it. It was signed, went into law January 1st, 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. And his comment was, it's remarkable to get this moment on a controversial bill, but it means nothing unless we make this moment meaningful, Newsom said after signing the legislation. And he contended with AB 392 in place, police will turn increasingly to de-escalation techniques, including verbal persuasion, weapons other than guns, and other crisis intervention methods. That was the hope.
Right. And that's what people are working on even today.
Lastly, I have to thank the governor. Governor Newsom has made a tremendous impact on the state of California in a short period of time. I told him just a few moments ago that if he were not governor, and we were a year earlier, I would still be arguing with the current governor to sign this bill. That we argued for over 3 weeks with AB 953 and threatened a hunger strike just to get a bill signed that would basically allow us to collect data concerning racial profiling. I could only imagine the battle I would be having right now with the governor's office about changing the culture of policing in California. It would be significant. And so I am grateful that my friend Tony Atkins told me to hold the bill, and that as a result of that, it has had a profound impact of us working this bill. And I thank the governor for his staff, for them working with us, believing in us, and helping us get this bill across the line. And I am so grateful to you for that. When others ask for reform in the future, you will look back and say, can it happen? Will it happen? And I hope you look at 392 and say that it can. We were told by so many that it could not happen. And we had felt that we were at the brink of failure at one point in this whole process. I felt the weight of the families. It's been a difficult journey because they entrusted me with trying to bring change. But my greatest fear is that if we had failed, those who want to make change will never work to do it again. And that was really the greatest pressure that I felt, that my colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate need to know that it is possible, it is necessary, and that we must do the work. And I want to thank everyone for making that possible. This bill broke records in terms of coming out of the House. 85% in the Assembly, 85% in the Senate. We had prayed for 51. And we were so grateful to so many members who finally saw what we were talking about. And lastly, I'm grateful to law enforcement who finally came around and went neutral on the bill. They made it difficult, but I've always believed that there is no testimony without a test. That if you believe in what you believe in, someone will challenge you. And your strength lies in what you believe in. And I'm grateful actually to them because I think the battle made me stronger, made us all more determined, and basically says to us that if we believe and we work hard, it will happen. Today we make policy that makes a life safer and for the future of California. The bill will basically make everyone in California safer. It will not bring back those that we've lost, but we hope and pray that it will prevent those from being lost. My father was had a fifth grade education and basically was semi-literate, but he worked every day of his life to make a difference for his children. And one thing he knew for sure, that tomorrow would be better for his children. That after he endured the kind of racism that existed in the South, he lived every day knowing that he was working to make life better for his children. My greatest fear is that even with all the education I have, that will not happen for my children and for my grandchildren. And with that in mind, I am motivated every day to make sure that I can at least do what a man with a fifth grade education did and a daughter who has multiple degrees can do. That we must make it better tomorrow for our children. So once again, thank you so very much for your support. Thank you for coming. We have been truly blessed by this occasion. And this will make a difference not only in California, but we know it will make a difference around the world. Thank you so much.
So now I have the incredible honor of introducing someone who is helping lead our state in protecting and uplifting California for all, our Governor Gavin Newsom.
I'm ready to sign this damn thing, so why don't we just cut to the chase? But I didn't fully appreciate the size of this stage, and you can't begin, as Dr. Weber did, with reciting an old African proverb about going fast but going alone versus going far, not going together, without inviting some folks up to the stage for this signing. I would be remiss, for those of you I had the privilege of spending a little time with a moment ago, if you would like, I would love to have you up here. For those that were deeply influential in helping get this bill to our desk, in addition to those behind me, I would be honored if you would join us up on stage. This would not have happened without all of you, and we would not be doing justice to this moment if I didn't invite you all up. That includes, by the way, these two, the future President of the United States and the Attorney General, who would need to stand in front of this podium on both sides. To the elected officials, the Attorney General, to our Lieutenant Governor. Doc. Javier, get up here. We're going to test this stage. As everybody assembles, and I went off script. Yeah, you two are in the front. But on both sides. I need you right there. You want to stand in? Yeah, there you go. That's important. So let me just extend my gratitude to everybody up on stage. Let me extend particular gratitude, as has been stated, to Dr. Shirley Weber for her faith and devotion to the cause of justice, to her tenacity, her hard work, her determination, for recognizing good enough never is, for not giving up a year ago where she could have given up, to come back with the kind of moral force that defined the moment. I'm grateful to you, Dr. Weber, for your example. Everybody up here on stage is grateful to you. And in the spirit of some of the comments that were referenced, I think people all across the country are grateful to you, because as California goes, so goes the rest of the United States of America. And we are doing something today that stretches the boundaries of possibility, that sends a message to people all across this country that they can do more and they can do better to meet this moment in their respective states. But one thing we all know, from the Speaker to the Pro Tem to those that were assembled up here and the Mayor, is program passing is not problem solving. It's one thing to sign a piece of paper, pass legislation. It's another to change hearts and minds, to change culture, to change the way people conduct themselves, to hold themselves to a higher standard. That's the work that is in front of us. That's the work that's inside of us. That's the work that we collectively as a community need to manifest, at peril of missing this moment and missing the point of this moment. Training matters, yes. Accountability matters, certainly. Transparency, indeed. But culture, changing hearts, changing minds, changing our approach to dealing with one another. I am incredibly cognizant of that responsibility. And that lies deeply, as your governor, in the executive, but it also resides in the leadership assembled around me to hold us to account and hold us to your expectations, which I know are a big part of why you're willing to even stand with us and be on stage at this moment. And so, again, with gratitude, with appreciation, and with a deep sense of responsibility, in a hope that we can reduce the number of lives lost and we can begin to build trust and heal. I'm honored now to sign this legislation, and I'm gratified. That is mine. 392 is now law in the state of California. Dr. Weber. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for being up here.
I guess want to say to so many degrees at a historical moment right now, while you were the California State Assembly member for the 79th District, you authored AB 3121, which was approved by Newsom in May of 2020 to establish a 9-member task force to inform Californians about slavery, to explore ways the state might provide reparations for slavery to African Americans.
Right, exactly. Yes, our reparations bill.
Dr. Weber has translated her lifelong commitment to service into an ambitious agenda, including legislation on education, civil rights, public safety, food insecurity, protections for persons with disabilities, and voting rights. As chair of the Elections and Redistricting Committee, Dr. Weber helped to oversee California elections and campaign finance law before becoming Secretary of State, and authored legislation to extend voting rights to people on parole, more than 50,000 Californians, and to ensure that those on probation and parole are aware of their voting rights and able to cast their ballots. In recognition of her dedication to public service and her fearless dedication to voting rights in California, Governor Newsom nominated Dr. Weber to be California's 31st Secretary of State on December 22nd, 2020, and she was confirmed by a bipartisan majority of both houses of the California Legislature on January 28th, 2021.
Yes, and that was quite a surprise, obviously, for me, because there were many people vying for Secretary of State. I just assumed that one of them would get it. I didn't get involved in the process that much initially. And so it was outside, once again, the forces outside nominating me to become state. So I was really surprised that the governor was even doing that, considering it, and very appreciative of it, because I would have stayed probably in the legislature and be finishing my last 2 years there this time. Because of term limits. But the opportunity came, and I took the opportunity because I knew that it would have some extremely significant importance because of the Voting Rights under attack by the Republicans in this country to not have Voting Rights Act, basically not have adequate redistricting and all those kinds of things, that we were really being thrown back into the 60s. And I felt very strongly that who but a kid whose parents were denied the opportunity to vote and grandparents never got a chance to vote could be responsible for the largest voting base in the nation, 40 million Californians. So I was intrigued by it and honored by the fact that the governor wanted me to basically be the voice of elections in California.
Carrie, thank you. And tonight, the governor announced his nominee to replace for the Secretary of State, and it's another historic pick. Assemblymember Shirley Weber will be the first African-American to hold that position in California. She's been in office since 2012. The nomination has to be approved by the state legislature in the next 9 months.
But that was a special session because Alex, what was his name, Padilla?
Alex Padilla, yeah.
I'm sorry, Alex Padilla vacated his seat because Kamala became vice president.
Right, Kamala Harris became vice president, and so therefore Alex was appointed to serve as the new senator, yes. And the vacancy occurred, and I was appointed to serve as Secretary of State.
Yes.
You there, man?
There we go.
By the way, my kids are jumping up and down in the back.
Ditto. They are 13, 7, and 5.
Yeah, forget about
all boys. So rough housing.
Hey, just remind me, because I remember I was just thinking, it's a hell of a time when you want to pick up the phone and call your mom or dad. I mean, we're all, this has been a hell of a time. But you lost your mom, a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, 2 years ago. So,
and where your mom and dad came from, remind me, I mean, they literally came both from Mexico.
Yeah, no, it's a story I'm proud of. They actually came separately. They met in Los Angeles. But they fell in love and applied for green cards.
Can you imagine what mom would be thinking now as I ask you if you want to be the next U.S. Senator of the United States, the great state of California?
You serious?
This is the official. This is the ask, brother.
I'm honored, man. And I'm humbled because of them. I can't tell you how many pancakes my dad flipped or eggs he scrambled, trying to provide for us, or into the many, many years of my mom cleaning houses, doing the same thing. So I try so hard to make sure that our democracy is as inclusive in California as we built, and to have an important perspective to bring to Washington.
You're going to have that chance, Alex. I'm honored. You got to say yes, though, man.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you, and please know I will make you proud and make California proud by getting it done in the U.S. Senate. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm ready.
A fearless advocate with unimpeachable integrity and moral clarity. There's no one better suited for the job of Secretary of State, Governor Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, and I appreciate his comments in terms of that. And he's continued to be supportive of the work in opening up the voting franchise for so many Californians.
A fearless advocate who takes on the tough fights. A moral leader on the front lines of the struggle for justice. And now, California's next Secretary of State. From public housing to a PhD from UCLA at 26, From San Diego to the state legislature, where she's been a champion for education and criminal justice reform, and a defender of civil rights and voting rights in California. That's why, in a time of unprecedented partisan attacks on our democracy, Dr. Weber is the right choice to protect the right to vote for all Californians.
Hi, I'm Assemblymember Shirley Weber, and I have been recently asked by Governor Newsom to accept the position of California Secretary of State. I am truly honored to accept it. And given my long history of working on behalf of Californians to ensure their right to vote, this is quite a challenge, but it's one that I welcome. And I look forward to serving the people of California as their Secretary of State.
You are the first African-American to serve as a California Secretary of State and the fifth to serve in a statewide position. You are the third African-American woman throughout the United States who's serving as Secretary of State. The other two are over here on the East Coast. I think one in New Jersey, and I forget where the other one is.
Philadelphia, is it?
It's on the East Coast.
Yeah, there are two other women that are serving. They serve in positions that are appointed by the governor indefinitely, so they don't have a separate voting base nor a separate voting voice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm elected, and I don't serve underneath the governor as they do. I serve as an independent, constitutionally elected officer. So therefore, I'm not beholding to the governor, and he can't get rid of me and whatever. Where others can be taken away out of those positions if the governor decides that he wants to do something else, because they're not elected officials. When I was appointed, I took up a position that was independent of the governor. Mm-hmm. And my election that took place in November established that I'm still an independently elected Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. Succession of line, for instance, there's a governor, lieutenant governor, there's a Secretary of State. So in case anything happens to any of the others, then you rise up to the next level.
At that time, you didn't know the significance of being elected California Secretary of State until after you became the first African-American in South Los Angeles to be elected to statewide office? Or am I saying that wrong?
Well, I was not aware of the fact that of the historical significance of me being Secretary of State. I mean, it's important when Black people get to these positions, the high positions. But I didn't think even beyond just that San Diego had never had a constitutional officer other than one, and that was Pete Wilson. So this state, the city that as large as San Diego County is, had not had constitutional officers, whether it's Secretary of State, whether it's Controller, Treasurer, we had none. And so I became the first one other than the governor, Pete Wilson, who was a constitutional officer, but San Diego had none. And in terms of African-American women, Kamala Harris was Attorney General, and then I'm Secretary of State. Those are the only Black women in California until Malia Cohen was elected. But there were very few Black women, and there were very few African Americans other than Merv Dimely, Wilson Riles, and then Tony Thurman. Those individuals, those three, and myself and Kamala are the only 5 constitutional officers in California's history when I was appointed.
Okay. And this is a quote. I really like it because I'm a writer and I just, I love things that are written beautifully. This was at your swearing in ceremony. I will spend all of my energies and all of my time making sure the Secretary of State's office is a voice for the voiceless. I will spend all of my energies and all of my time making sure the Secretary of State's office is a voice for the voiceless. I will make sure that those who have been locked out and left out so often will forever be included. And that's my mission. That's my goal, whether it's dealing with elections or dealing with small businesses or with licenses and nonprofits or dealing with our archives, that we have to preserve everything great and good about this state. Because my daddy traveled here years ago because there was no hope in Arkansas, but there was hope in California.
Yes, those of us who are elected officials have a unique responsibility because you're picked to basically represent people, and everybody can't come to Sacramento, and everyone can't be in the room to push the button to vote for things. So therefore, you are their representative. You're their voice. And then you layer on that I'm an African American, that I'm a woman from poverty, first generation, whatever. You end up realizing that you have to basically speak for those people who could not speak because somebody spoke for you when you were in those positions. And so I've always felt a tremendous responsibility to make sure that those who were left out and not included are included in the conversation through me. That the issues they felt and faced in life, that I should be able to do that for them. And I had so many people coming when I was going to school or whatever, would always say to me, you know, girl, you're going to make us all proud, you know, because you're going to speak for us. And they were telling the truth. I'm going to speak for them. And that's important because that's what everybody needs, is someone to recognize them and to be their voice, because we can't all talk at the same time. Yeah.
No, we
What an
cannot.
extraordinary thing. It's a real testament to Dr. Weber's status that there were no votes against Dr. Weber's confirmation, which is again testament to her character, her faith and devotion to so many causes.
Over the years, or actually decades, that I have gotten to see Dr. Weber in action. First, as a school board president committed to improving experiences and outcomes for all of our students. That's where I first met Dr. Weber. As an assembly member leading the fight for justice, equality, and progress. As the chair of the Budget Committee, the Elections Committee, and the Legislative Black Caucus, using her gifts and her gumption to make life better for others. So it is my pleasure now to introduce Governor Newsom to present the oath of office to the Honorable Dr. Shirley Weber.
I, Shirley Weber,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
as Secretary of State,
as Secretary of State,
the great state of California.
the great state of California.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Madam Secretary of State.
Thank you.
Give her a treat.
All right.
Thank all of my colleagues. Those of you in my family who listened to them the other day realize that I have a very wonderful and personal relationship with everyone in the Assembly and the Senate. And I've tried to do my best, as my mom has taught me, to always respect them, to respect their point of view, and to do my best to argue on my behalf, but to stand my ground and fight for what I knew was right. I will spend all of my energies and all of my time making sure that the Secretary of State's office is a voice for the voiceless, that I will make sure that those who have been locked out and left out so often will forever be included. And that's my mission and that's my goal, whether it's dealing with elections or dealing with small businesses or dealing with licenses and nonprofits or dealing with our archives, that we have to preserve everything that is great and good about this state. Because my daddy traveled here years ago because he knew there was no hope in Hope, Arkansas, but there was hope in California.
Briefly tell us, what is your role as California Secretary of State?
Well, it's an interesting, you know, I have 600 employees working for me. One of our main objectives, obviously, is the elections. I'm responsible for the 58 counties, the elections that occur. It's all in my office, the training, the people that work there to make sure that the elections go. I am the chief election officer for the state of California. Mm-hmm. So I'm in charge of all things related to elections, down to helping people pick out where the polls are going to be and those kinds of things. In addition to that, my office has the largest unit that deals with businesses. If you're going to have a business in California, you're going to become an LLC or whatever it may be, you're going to come to my office to get your license, to get your information, to file your papers for your license. Mm-hmm. We do the same thing with all nonprofits. So I'm in charge of all businesses and nonprofits. I'm in charge of the political reform division that deals with all the regulations concerning elections and making sure people don't violate the law. In my office is also the archives, California's history. We have 4 or 5 floor archives that my folks are responsible for all of the history of California. It's amazing what's in the archives, the first books, the first Bibles, the first this, the first that. All that stuff is in the archives, and we work hard to make sure that also the archives are a reflection of the diversity in California, so that that we do have women that have done some things. So we've been highlighting those issues, highlighting in the Native Americans, the Indians, all the history of California is in the archives of California. So we do those. I have a huge staff of people who run all those things. I'm the main person who signs off on everything that's there. But we run the elections, we run the businesses, the nonprofits, we do political reform, and we have our archives. So we have an amazing set of individuals and an amazing mission to bring all this thing. The Secretary of State's office really touches the life of every Californian, where some may not, but that one does.
It sounds like it.
Gems of the California State Archives. Inside the vault of the California State Archives, our state's history is eternally preserved. The state's first constitution, Approved by delegates at California's first constitutional convention in 1849, the state's first constitution was published in both English and Spanish. Its wide publication helped the state's electorate overwhelmingly ratify the document and establish a constitutional democracy. On January 5, 1850, the first law signed by California's first governor, Peter Burnett, established the California State Archives. The statutes of 1850 charged the Secretary of State to receive all public records connected with the political history and past administration of the government of California. The Archives proudly preserves many government records, even the records of fugitives with wild rewards for wild crimes. These wanted signs from 1862 offer cash prizes today valued at over $5,000 and $21,000. While $1,000 in 1862 could buy a person many things, it still couldn't buy you a map like this. These Spanish and Mexican land grants from 1840 show a vast amount of land in what is today Sonoma County. The land grant system had a profound influence on California, shaping settlement patterns and land ownership. The California State Archives has over 650 maps like these detailing the missions, ranchos, pueblo lands, Indian reservations, and government lands of early California. These are just some of the gems of the California State Archives, home to over 300 million documents of California's history. You can get a peek behind the scenes on one of our many tours. Visit sos.ca.gov/archives for more information.
If Governor Newsom and the Lieutenant Governor can't perform their duties, you're the third politician in line of succession?
I think that there might be the speaker before me, but in terms of constitutional officers, I'm the third line of succession.
Mm-hmm. For several decades, you held numerous leadership positions. Professor Emerita of Africana Studies at San Diego State University. You became its chair, teaching for 40 years. President of National Council for Black Studies, served as a board member and later president of San Diego Board of Education, served as chairwoman of San Diego Citizens Equal Opportunity Commission. Over a decade ago, you had little ambition for higher office and said being a politician is a lonely experience. Is it fair to say that your flawless trailblazing path of leadership and creating hope prepared you to possibly govern a state?
I would say that every experience I've had, sometimes you don't think it does, but it does. Every experience I've had with leadership or with additional responsibilities, whatever they may be, prepares you to be a good listener and a good thinker and a person who can stand strong and tall. So yes, every position I've had has prepared me for something else if I choose it. And I tell people all the time, take advantage of the opportunities you have, because every now and then you'll learn some stuff and you'll discover, what does that really mean? And when it comes down to administering offices or channeling, you basically have the skills and the knowledge to do that. Mm-hmm. Compare your skills and your knowledge, or I compare my experience and knowledge to all the other elected officials and what have you. Yeah, I stand with them, and sometimes taller than some of them.